Hi everyone, just wanted to welcome you to our last theater session of the day for Mainframe. This is actually a really cool panel. We've assembled quite an assemblage of great people here. So this is about Linux. Andrew Chapman from Seay is going to be our moderator. And Andrew, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Priya. So thanks everybody. As Priya said, we're doing a panel. We're doing a little bit of a different sort of layout of a session today, because I think because of what's happening with around Linux on Z, we really wanted to bring together some people from different parts of the industry to talk about what Linux and what the changes that we're seeing sort of recently mean to us. So I'm just going to do a very brief introduction, and then we'll do a little bit of a round robin, and then we'll sort of get into some of the more in-depth conversations. So I'm going to start with Ashley, who gets a special mention, not just because Ashley's a customer, but Ashley, I have to mention this, flew in this morning and is flying home on the red eye today.
Just for Linux.
Just to this session.
Just for Linux.
And as I say, I'd like to believe he's doing it just for me, but it's actually doing it for Linux. But Ashley's from Brown Brothers Harriman, a big user of Linux, and we'll be hearing a lot more about what Ashley's been doing. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And Cameron's joining us from North Carolina A&T. So Cameron's actually from one of our academic institutions, and we think this is really important. And we'll be talking a little bit about why is it so important to get academic institutions involved, and not just in Linux, but actually in more things on the mainframe. But Linux is really is a sort of a good sort of groundswell of interest. So we'll be hearing from Cameron. So Cameron, thank you too. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And then Bryan. Bryan is joining us from is it IBM? Is that
small company?
Yeah, IBM. Some other vendor who makes software in the mainframe space. So I'm sure Bryan will have something to say around Linux on Z. So Bryan, thanks for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And then Alan's joining us. Alan's from SUSE, but Alan also has a few other hats that we'll be talking around the open source community. So Alan's going to bring a little bit of a different perspective, obviously representing SUSE, but we're really going to be hearing some things from Alan around what it means to be sort of open source on the mainframe. So I'm just going to kick off a little bit with a little bit of a sort of potted history, certainly from CA's perspective as to what we've seen on Linux. I mean, I think for the last 2 years I've presented, here at CA World and at Share and other conferences about research that we did talking to a lot of our customers. We actually interviewed nearly 200 mainframe customers and asked them, why were they using Linux? What was interesting to them Linux? And actually, more importantly, why weren't they using Linux? So we made a point of making sure we talked to as many customers, in fact, more customers who weren't using Linux on Z than were. And we got a lot of feedback, and we've presented that, and actually be willing to share that deck with anybody who wants to see it. But the crux of it was that there are barriers to us using Linux on Z that just get in the way of Z being a platform. And the barriers included availability of software and components of software. So we want to deploy onto Linux on Z, but the things we want to deploy are not readily available on the platform. And that, that's causing us just a little bit of heartache, and that's enough heartache to stop us actually doing this. Another example was skills. You needed to bring people in who understood things like ZVM, and if you don't work on the mainframe, ZVM is not something you've heard of. You don't know what ZVM is. It's not a common technology. And then another one that came up was pricing. And surprisingly, it wasn't the price. The price was actually very good. I mean, when you start looking at the cost, certainly at scale, Linux on Z is very, very economical. The issue was the pricing model. So the fact that your first IFL fully loaded for your first guest was a budget item around $250,000. Now, once you started going to scale, you didn't mind that so much, but those first 2, 3, 4 IFLs, that was a problem for people, getting that initial initial deployments out. So we've talked about those things. We're not the only people talking about them. This was fairly common knowledge. The reason we wanted to do this panel was a lot of things have changed just in the last 6 months, and I would say all of the things I've mentioned have been addressed in some sort of shape or form, and I think it's really important that we hear that not just from people who have a real strong vested interest like IBM and CA, but actually from the community of people that are involved in deploying Linux on Z. So I'm going to start actually with Alan, just to talk a little bit about why isn't this just Linux anymore? We've always talked about Linux on Z, and the conversation that you'll hear today, and the conversation you'll have been hearing if you've been following this, is a little bit more than Linux. So Alan, can you just touch on what else we're actually talking about other than just Linux?
So we're talking about open source, a lot of new open source. Linux, particularly from SUSE, has been available on the mainframe for 15 years. We're celebrating our 15th birthday right now. So you can say open source has been on mainframe for a long time, but in the last few months we've seen a lot of movement with the announcement of KVM, availability of cloud and so forth. So it's momentum. We're just, all of a sudden we're seeing this new surge of momentum.
So Bryan, let's get into some specifics, because obviously there are some things that have actually happened, some announcements that many of you in the audience will be aware of. But if you could just, and I have a slide just to give us a little bit of context for that. Oh, sorry, I thought these were hidden. There we go. So if you could just, at a high level, just cover some of the things that we've seen happen in the last 6 months around Linux One, that would be great.
Sure. So what we saw is we talked to our clients and we talked to other people in the industry that are not our clients. We see the growing importance of Linux in the industry, period, right? No matter what platform they're running it on. They want to run more and more open source workloads. They want to run mission critical workloads on these platforms. They want to simplify their environments, and they're looking at Linux as the answer. What we saw from our clients directly was they needed that investment not only in what we do as enterprise software, right, IBM or Seay or numerous other ones, but also from the open source community. So we made a big investment. And you saw that investment come to life in the August announced at LinuxCon, right? We announced 2 new systems and a new brand, really, the Linux One brand. And that was really about bringing the best of enterprise computing and the capabilities customers were looking for to what they were trying to do with Linux, with the flexibility and agility and the openness that they got from that world, and they love that world, right? But the digital economy is really growing, the transaction rate and the data rate and everything's exploding, and they didn't know how to handle it, right? They came to us and said, how do we do this, right? So that's where we introduced the Emperor. I mean, it's a monster of a box, right? It's 141 Linux cores, right? It's 10 terabytes of memory, right? The availability characteristics we all know and love, right? And that's what they're looking for. They're starting to bet their business on this kind of work. The ability to take, they have tens of thousands of servers on their floor. The ability to take that and consolidate down to a couple footprints, easier to manage, less power, less floor space, less of a nightmare to deal with. And then they don't have to deal with the problems they had in the 10,000 servers. They can now focus on becoming that digital company. How to mobilize their environments, how to cloudify their environments, how to get competitive advantage. And that's what they were looking for. So it really made a big investment in not only the server and bringing those capabilities like SMT, simultaneous multi-threading, like vector processing with SIMD, with the 10 terabytes of memory, reducing the price of memory. We made a big investment into the open source community. You see languages, developers today want to write in PHP or Python or Ruby or JavaScript or you name it. Let them, right? Let them do that. Let them do it on an enterprise server. We brought the databases like MongoDB or MariaDB or name your favorite database in addition to DB2 or Oracle, which are also choices. And what we see clients want to do is integrate this new capability, not replace, but integrate it with their existing enterprise software that they have and take advantage of the best of both worlds. Management software, right? KVM, which SUSE is supporting on the platform. KVM, so you don't need the deep skills. Chef, Puppet, Docker, right? A lot of the capabilities that companies are moving to in order to be able to be competitive in the digital age. So we've done a lot of that. The pricing changes, as Andrew referred to, taking the risk away, making those steps smaller, making it a lot more granular, and changing from a capital expense to a monthly operational expense. That's what customers want today, right? So that's what we offered. Again, all the great capabilities, simplification in one box that we offered, but it really was about the open source capabilities that we're looking for.
And just to be clear, just to reiterate, on the pricing front, we're talking about a 1-year commitment, and for a 2.5 IFL Rockhopper machine, something in the region of $8,000 a month?
8,000 per, yep.
Right, so I mean, we're talking with no capital up front. So I mean, this really addressed one of the big issues we had, certainly with First in Enterprise, when we talked to customers that, getting started was a high risk item. They had to really, not go all in, but they certainly had to buy in on a big time. So, we've seen that the one remaining issue that we still see that I guess is a harder one is politics. And you guys are aware of this. There's just the internal sort of politics of some, trying to get somebody to even sort of take that risk. I think that one's a cultural thing, but I think we get to that, and that's probably a good segue to Ashley. So BBH have been using Linux on Z for a long time. Tell us a little about why and what you've been using it for at BBH.
Sure. So for those who are not familiar with BBH, Brown Brothers Harriman is a privately held financial institution providing banking services, investment management, investor services. The company's been around almost 200 years. So we've had the pleasure actually of running Linux on Z, not for 200 years, but the mainframe obviously has played a strong role in that. But Linux on Z started out our journey in 2003. So we were at the point where we were running out of space in our data center. We had new requirements coming in, new applications that needed a home. And as you know, when we're running in a production shop, it's not about just providing a secure and stable production environment, but also the 10 or so other test environments that go along with it. Bottom line, a lot of hardware. So collaborating with IBM at the time with I think it was the T-Rex 990 machines, we said, hey, we have an investment, we have senior management that believes in the platform, the stability, and all the functional, non-functional that comes with it. Why don't we give it a shot? So, of course, IBM said, hey, start out small. Maybe put a couple of utility servers. And our partnership said, hey, nah, what we'll do is we'll put the newest client-facing application on there. So we started out in 2003, Java front end, Oracle back end, on a couple of IFLs, didn't add cost to the data center environmentals. And I could say now, significant cost avoidance, significant cost savings. We were able to leverage mainframe skill set that we had in the house, which was basic for VM to get that up and running, and also leverage Unix and Linux skills that were readily available at the time. So I would say, again, since 2003, that's really been our base and how we got started into this journey. Excellent,
excellent, thank you. So Cameron, why do we have a university represented on the panel? I mean, why are universities looking at, Linux is Linux. Why an interest in the mainframe specifically?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. Academics don't usually get invited to these kind of things. So. But we've been in this space for, the mainframe space at large for probably about 10 years now, placing students. And our focus has been on ZOS because that's where most of the jobs are, ZOS. But as I was telling Ashley earlier, I first got introduced to VM in 2008. So I'm coming late to the party. But I saw it and I immediately was captivated with the elegance and the power of it. It's a captivating operating system. My program at A&T is an information technology program. We're not computer science, we're not information systems. We're strictly information technology, and we have a definition of that. But we're a very big Linux shop, very big Linux shop. We also teach mainframe. So I've been teaching a VM course for a number of years. Now I am starting to see some requests for VM skills. Haven't seen it over the last couple of years, but now seeing people saying, okay, we want somebody to know something about VM. But it really allows us to kind of intersect the two worlds that we live in, the Linux world and the mainframe world. And I can tell you, the industry may not know this, but the students really love this. They really love VM. They don't know, no undergraduates have not heard of VM. They love it because when they see what it can do compared to a tool like VMware or something, it's night and day. So that's why we're in it. And it helps us, our stock and trade in our department are not necessarily software engineers, but what we call enterprise architects. That's who we try to build, enterprise architects. And so this is a perfect environment because we can teach a lot of networking in it. We can do a lot of stuff in this environment.
Actually, that raises the point that Bryan, you didn't touch on, which was the Linux One developer cloud. We're talking about accessibility to systems. Do you want to just touch on that very briefly? Because I think that's an important point. Cameron was touching on. People haven't seen or don't have access to VM to play with it.
Absolutely, that is one of the issues. Was just sounds interesting, but can I get my hands on it? Or as a developer, can I just play with it and see what it looks like? we want to open that up. We want people, we love this platform, right? We want people to be able to take a look, play with it. So we announced the Community Cloud as part of the announcement in August, and really had 3 parts. One is to get software vendors that don't have access to the mainframe, give them access. Let them give it a try, see it's not hard to port at all. A lot of the open source that we brought over, a lot of it wasn't even a porting effort, it was just a compile and test. Just compile and then test and you're good to go, right? So let the vendors try it. The second was for clients that didn't necessarily want to do a formal proof of concept, but just want to kick the tires. Take some of their maybe Java, JavaScript code, give it a try. And if they like it, then they'll come to us and we'll talk a little more formally, but just go play. For the application developer community, for students in college that don't have access to the mainframe like Cameron's students do, for research teams that want to give it a try. We're opening up a community cloud for application developers. The initial one will be hosted at Marist. We expect that to go live in early December. And that's a way for them to just get a virtual machine. It's just a Linux virtual machine. They don't have to configure it. Here, write some code, give it a shot. And like you said, most of the students that try it fall in love with it. Yeah. It's faster, it's reliable. They can do whatever they want in that Linux virtual machine, and they come to love it. There's no difference. So we're opening up access to the community, and we hope that it demystifies the platform.
Right, and gives people a chance to actually try it out and get stuff working. So Ashley, can we sort of just drill down a little bit more? I mean, you've been particularly aggressive, or BBH have been particularly aggressive about Linux on Z, and other customers are not. I mean, could you just explain, I mean, how is it that you've been so aggressive and have stuck with it and seen such success, perhaps when other people haven't? I mean, can you explain?
Yeah, sure. It's really about proven technology. When we talk about our clients, we don't want to put solutions in front of them that back end, we're worrying about whether the hardware is going to fail, is there redundancy? These are things that we really don't have to worry about with the System Z platform, where it's a proven platform, you take care of it, you keep it, you feed it, memory and IFLs, and it'll perform. So the idea is that we had that proven in the shop, put Linux on it, and we went with SUSE Linux, which has been extremely stable in the years that we've deployed it. So it's about putting the confidence that our infrastructure folks, our management, they don't have to worry about whether the hardware is going to fail. The commodity aspect of it, right? Because we're talking about an enterprise-grade solution, enterprise-grade operating system, and enterprise-grade solutions that we're providing our clients. The other benefit that we saw, again, I talked to you in the beginning, it was really about consolidation, saving on the data center space. But when we looked at it, the different types of workloads we could put in the platform, it became a significant savings from a software perspective. So as you know, a lot of the software solutions are core-based. So when we look at the IFLs and the amount of work they can process compared to an x86 box, we were putting more VMs on these IFLs, thereby lessening the amount of software license that we have to buy. I mean, sure, the IBM software team didn't like that too much, but in the end, it was a success for both of us because the workload that we put on the platform, whether it be Cognos, whether it be Portal or other Java or database workloads, again, we were able to do it in a way that the business liked the numbers because we were able to, again, do this in a cost-effective manner, but also, again, going back, provide that enterprise-grade quality that they expect from us.
But you have mainframes already. You have mainframes running ZOS. You already have that infrastructure in place, I assume.
That's right.
Do you still see resistance to Linux on Z internally, or is it accepted now as being a sort of tier 1 platform?
There's not a day go by that someone doesn't ask, wait, why do you want us to run our application on the mainframe? And we had one development team, in fact, people as high as the Chief Technology Officer office coming in and saying, wait a minute, that's legacy. We shouldn't be putting anything new. But the reality is, people really shouldn't care what platform they're running on, as long as we're enabling their work, enabling what they need to get done, doing it in a resilient manner. So the idea is we focus less on the meat and potatoes behind the mainframe and say, hey, we're providing you a Linux server, go for it. If you have any issues, you let us know, we'll help you solve it. We'll talk about that later. But that's really what it's about. It's about enabling that work and putting less of the political conversations on legacy concerns versus new and innovative ways.
Excellent. And so Bryan, this must be music to your ears to hear customers talking like this, but there's a lot of non-converts I mean, you know, how do you go about trying to promote this kind of sort of attitude in other customers? I mean, what else can be done jointly? Everybody on the stage, everybody in the audience. I mean, what else can we be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it is music to my ear. I could listen to Ashley talk more about this subject. But we do, usually what happens is clients will come to us really describing a problem, right? They're not coming looking for, you know, a mainframe, or they're not looking for Linux 1 necessarily. What they're looking for is a solution to a problem they have, right? And it might be that server sprawl that they're facing, be it physical or now virtual. Mm-hmm. It may be the ability to keep their mission critical workloads up and consistently running and not have to spend the resources to do so, right? The manpower, the person power to do that. So when we start those conversations, it is similar. It is for that type of environment, right? Not for all workloads that run on Linux, but for that type of environment, you absolutely want that on a mission critical platform, right? That's where we start working out the simplification. We have a lot of clients that have, we've done studies on this where they have maybe 100 combinations between hardware and operating system that they constantly have to patch. They don't know where they are on the security patches, right? They're exposed that way. They don't even know they have certain servers. When we show them the data, they're like, I don't have that many combinations. Yeah, you do, and a lot are old because they just forgot about them. They're looking to get rid of that middle tier, HPUX, get rid of Solaris, get some of the older platforms that are no longer strategic for them, and either move them up to Linux on Z or to Linux on X, right? We see a lot of the cloud deployments, be it private cloud or hybrid cloud, also being deployed on X or Linux on Z, right? It's moving to Linux. So what they're looking for is to reduce the amount of effort they have to put into that. Right. Give you an example of operational efficiency. We had a client that was moving up to a Z13. They were able to roll almost 1,000 virtual machines in a 2-hour period up to the new hardware level, and everything was up and running, no issues, right? When we talk to other clients on the distributed side, they'll say that is usually on the average of 2 to 3 months to roll that many virtual machines up to the next platform. And that's just wasted resource that you're not doing something that's going to get competitive advantage for you.
And it's, I mean, it certainly seems to me, although we keep having these conversations, the virtual machine conversation, and now we're talking about containers, and you know, every time we raise that level of abstraction from the platform, we keep telling ourselves the platform doesn't matter, we can deploy anywhere we want, and we kind of hope that that story's true, because then the performance and the service quality that you're getting from the platform becomes the most important thing, not the chipset, not the architecture, assuming everything else is equal. And I think open source certainly is playing in this space, that we've gone away from these, okay, I'm going to buy a platform and then I'm going to buy a platform stack that runs on that platform, and I'm kind of stuck into that. So we'll use that as a bit of a segue to talk a little bit more about what's happening in open source and on the mainframe. And what I'd actually like to do is talk a little bit about the Open Mainframe project. Alan, if you could just give us a little bit of an overview about the Open Mainframe project, and I'll just point out, before we forget, that ADP actually is also one of our founding Platinum members. We didn't have permission to use their logo yesterday. We have it today, but we didn't have a chance to get it onto the slide. But ADP is also one of the Platinum founding members as well. So if you could just give us a little bit of an overview as to okay. What is this, and what are these projects, and how do they exist?
So let me give you a little bit of background about open source, just to set some basis here. Open source is not new. Open source has been around for a long time. The most famous project, of course, is Linux, right? And there's thousands of vendors that are involved with Linux. It took Linux a long time before it was commercially adopted. Now it's widely adopted, and it's spawned other ideas in open source efforts. A good example of that is infrastructure as a service cloud, right? OpenStack launched about 5 years ago, and to date, they have almost 800 organizations that are involved. So these projects have become huge. So this past year, the Linux Foundation itself has launched at least 11 new open source efforts. And the change is, you know, it used to be Linux was considered a hobbyist for a long time. It was a hobbyist project. These new projects that have launched this year are well funded, they're well staffed, and they're very active, okay? And a good example of that is the Open Mainframe project. So of these 11 projects, if I go through and talk about the innovation that's happening in the world today, most of it's happening in the open source world, right? We talk about containers, we've talked about big data, I've heard Internet of Things talked about today, and so forth.
Drones, don't forget drones.
And drones,
There's a drone project.
Well, yeah.
I want to join the drone.
Some of them are esoteric. You wouldn't think drones would be of interest to anybody, but it's a huge project, an open source project. So there's a variety of things that are happening in open source. And then so you have to ask yourself, why open source? And then secondly, why Linux Foundation? Well, the thing that open source allows me to do is collaborate, and a lot of times I'm collaborating with my competitor, okay? So the significant part of this is the Linux Foundation plays a role where I can collaborate with the people that I partner with and people I compete with, but they provide me a neutral ground where we can do that. So the Open Mainframe project is a good example of that. We come in and we've set down the ground rules and said, here's our objective, here's what our mission is, right? We've created a structured organization, and then the Linux Foundation provides this neutral environment where we can work together. And by working together and collaborating together, we're able to deliver a solution. As you said, customers are looking for a solution. We're able to deliver these solutions much quicker to the market. The second part about open source is all of the vendors and everybody that participates, it's not just vendors, but individuals as well, they come in with an objective. They've got a certain market they're attacking, a solution that they're looking for, a problem they're trying to solve. That might be different than my need, but by collaborating together and using this neutral platform and neutral environment, we can both solve our needs and deliver a solution that matches the customers and market set that we're after. That's what creating these projects enables me to do.
Excellent, and thanks for the background. That's helpful too. And you know, we've been very careful to make sure, and this is why I mentioned, you know, ADP being a member. I know BBH are looking at joining as well. This is not a vendor-driven process. It's certainly not an IBM-driven process, and I'm not, not saying that in a joking way. We need to make sure that this is something that is moving everybody in the industry forwards, and that the way we're approaching this helps drive it for everybody. So to that end, one of the early members of the community was North Carolina A&T. So. Right. Again, why join the Open Mainframe project? What's in it for a college?
Well, as I said earlier, this space allows us to tie together two parts of our program, right? The mainframe part and the Linux part. And we love to be a part of these type of innovative, collaborative environments with folks that are kind of leaders in the field, like IBM, Seay, SUSE, et cetera. So when we had an opportunity to play in this, it was kind of a no-brainer. It's like, okay, we'll join. As a matter of fact, we weren't on I think you were there the 17th, right, in Seattle. Yeah, I wasn't, but the reason we weren't on the first announcement was because I was getting the dean to sign it. He was signing it that morning.
That's right. He had signed it before that meeting, I remember.
Yeah, exactly, and I had to ship it off there. But no, we like to be a part of these things. It gives us visibility. So, a lot of people in the audience have never heard of North Carolina A&T. Well, you've heard of North Carolina A&T now. So we're in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it gives us visibility, and it allows us to play in a space to be at the cutting edge of things. We like to stay a little bit ahead of the curve, a lot ahead of the curve. Sometimes you can be too much ahead of the curve. But this is one that keeps us right on the innovation of what's going on in this space. So. Yeah.
And get you a trip to Vegas, which, as you say, doesn't happen too often.
I'm here, yeah. Even if it is for one day, but that's okay. That's the life of an academic. So
I'm going to ask you to represent all customers in the world, Ashley. So what's in it for customers? Why do you think that something like the Open Mainframe project is relevant to customers?
Well, for us, given that we've chosen to have Linux on Z part of our solution, any initiative that's going to support that ecosystem, that enables more workload, is a good thing. The thing is, it's not just about, I want to be clear, it's not just about a science project. Like when I talk to other Linux professionals, they say, is it a showcase to put it on the mainframe? It's not just about running a solution on the platform. It's about providing the ecosystem to support it. So whether it be it's an open source database, we don't want to just be able to run the database. We want tools to secure it, to monitor it, to debug it. So it's about enabling that ecosystem and allowing development communities to have access to that and not be put into a box. So if you're running on Linux on the mainframe, you can only run this tool, or if you're running on a different platform, you're running that tool. It's about, this is a great initiative to, again, enable the Linux conversation and then get the benefits of the mainframe with that. That's really what it's about.
Excellent, thank you. So one of the things we did want to talk about a little bit were the remaining objections, or the objections. So we touched at the beginning about, so what were we hearing 2 years ago, what were we hearing a year ago, and then we've talked a little bit about some of the things that we've seen. We've talked about pricing, we've talked about moving more commonly used open source, and actually not just open source components. I mean, just to be clear, the list, this is not a comprehensive list. There is, I can send you a URL, or you can just Google. There's a literally in real time a list of the products that are being ported to Linux on Z, which, as Bryan said, sometimes was just a recompile. I think IBM's being a little bit modest. I happen to know that they've actually done a lot of work to the core code, and they've recontributed it back to the community, which the community likes. But this is a list of mostly open source, although some of the software behind us on the list is actually proprietary as well. I don't think we can assume that just because you fixed pricing and because of this and because we're all sitting here sort of happy in Vegas on the slide that things are going to be rosy. There's still certainly one issue that we hear, which is, what about those commercial applications? So Bryan, I mean, what's the hope for us to get more of the sort of the larger scale commercial offerings? I mean, what can we do as a community? What can the OMP do? I mean, how can we help to get some of those commercial applications onto Z?
So I think there's a couple ways, and I think we're seeing the interest already, right? I think the vendors actually see the growth of Linux in the industry. They see it moving more into the enterprise as well as more into the government space, right? So they understand the space we play in and the clients that we have on the platform and want to be there as well. I think a lot of it is from our clients, right? We've worked even on some of these, let's say some of the databases, right? Gone with clients to the vendors and say, look, we have clients that want this. They want your product. We want to support your product. What can we do together? I think by opening up the systems, working with them, showing that it's not a big deal to come onto the platform, which is sometimes a concern because it's unknown, right? I don't know if I can port this to your platform. It's easy, right? And we help them, we show them, and they're on the platform, and then they have a new customer base. So we work with the community. You'll see vendors in the Open Mainframe project. And again, the thought is to bring them together right with clients to help solve problems. The clients are trying to do something for the future, and the vendors are right there with them in the Open Mainframe project, also trying to solve those same problems. So I think if they see it as a win-win, they're in.
Excellent, thank you. And actually I should point out, Ubuntu is another distribution of Linux, which is typically, perhaps not typically an enterprise server deployment, but certainly it's a very, very common deployment of Linux, so support for that's been announced as well, which might be just more fun than anything else, but an interesting port. So actually you did touch on the objections and that you still hear those objections. Can you drill down a little bit on what other objections you hear and perhaps, again, what we can do as a community to help address some of those?
Sure. I think the biggest one, as one already stated, that the support, right? Support of solutions that whether we want to run on or the business brings to us and says, here, we want you to be able to support it, that we look and say, hey, it's not supported on Linux on Z. Again, I've been involved with Linux on Z since 2003, and I've personally knocked on the door of IBM and SUSE and Seay and asked, hey, why not? What's taking you so long? But I could say, through the Chip Hopper program, through working with business partners, I've seen a great improvement in enabling that workload that we were looking for. And a lot of the CA solutions, whether it be in security space, whether it be in UIM for infrastructure, it has truly become, I say it's only enterprise if it could support Linux on Z. Don't call it an enterprise solution if it could only run on x86 or only run on Solaris.
I like that.
And again, Seay responded, if you look at UIM, You look at some of the AutoSys and other type of solutions, and SUSE, you know, we're having a conversation too as far as SUSE on power systems. Actually, that's another thing that we're going through. So another cycle. But I would say that has been the #1 thing, but great improvement there. The other thing is that I want to point out is the skill set. So, like I said, we leverage existing skill set, whether it be Unix and others, to run Linux on Z. But there is a little bit of skill set in the VM space in order to truly exploit. It's not a set it and a forget it type of thing, but I know that a lot of solutions that we saw, Wave and other things, have come out that takes the skill set requirements a little bit less. And then people talking about KVM, I'm still a skeptic on whether KVM can provide the full functionality like VM does. But I think those are two areas that, as a customer, you know, we've experienced but have seen positive growth and turnaround on.
And Ashley, you mentioned the chip hopper. Let me just mention, so Paul Newton's here with us. And so what we do, the chip hopper program, is we do bring a vendor that might not be on the platform. We'll actually bring them into the chip hopper program. They actually help provide systems and skills to help them get onto the platform. So it is great. So if you do have a vendor that you want to bring on, just look for IBM chip hopper and come talk to us.
Yeah, we actually had a few solutions go through it, and again, we're running on the platform now, so yep. It does work.
So I'm going to quote Ashley. We did do a session similar to this maybe a month or so ago, and I don't know if one of us said it was something to do with customer demand. You know, the reason that software wasn't perhaps moving to Linux on Z was based on customer demand, and Ashley said, "I'm the customer and I demanded," which I thought was a classic line. So if anyone wants to argue with Ashley, I'll leave it to you. Leave you to it. So before we do a sort of wrap up, we actually have the opportunity to take questions from the audience. This is actually a taped session, so if you have a question, either shout it out and I'll repeat it, or if you want to use the mic, there's a mic here. So does anyone have any questions for anybody on the panel that they'd like to ask? If you could use the mic, that would be helpful. Thanks.
I would like to ask. I have been a Linux instructor in my past at the junior college level. When these programs are to teach people the commands, maybe get an initial installation on a PC going, and then the class is just about done. You know, VI editor stuff. I mean, I don't mean to get so technical on things, but what is it that's taught at your school that gives more exposure to Linux? Basically what the Linux programs or Unix before that were always part of a networking program. Mm-hmm. So, and oftentimes it doesn't get into administration too much. So they're not going to use the tools that have them actually do anything with networks. They're not going to use tools that might set up a web server, get them into setting up an LDAP or anything like that. So it's just, 9 to 12 weeks or 16 weeks, and then they're done, and they kind of like, students like Windows so much that they don't want to type on the command line.
Well, I mean, for us, we don't try to do everything in 15 weeks. So we have 5 Linux courses. Now, they're not required. 2 of those courses are required. And then my course, which is on VM, is an elective. So they've already had 2 Linux courses when they come to mine. And it runs basically basic skill set, and then the second course is pretty much admin stuff, right? And then they come to my course, it's pretty straightforward what I teach them. CP, CMS, installation, a little second level stuff, and then kind of Linuxy stuff at the end of that. You can cover that in 15 weeks, but you can't do everything. To get good Linux skills, you can't do it in 1 semester. You can't. We don't try to.
The other thing to check out, if you Google Master the Mainframe, it's a contest that we run, and it actually takes students through from very easy to more and more advanced skills. And a lot of them come through that program, even high school kids. My 2 16-year-old sons are doing it right now. They come out with a sense of, wow, what a great platform this is, and they learn something along the way and have the pride. So Master the Mainframe, it's worth looking at.
So the other thing I was going to chip in with is the Linux Foundation actually provides training as well. And I know Introduction to Linux, so the command line stuff, there's like 250,000 people that have taken it or some huge number like that. So even outside of college, outside of school, there's materials available. A lot of the open source projects put that material out there under Creative Commons. It's free and open and available. So even in school, you can pick it up and use it as part of your courses.
And the Linux Foundation, the sort of intro to Linux course, I would actually recommend, even if you're familiar with Linux, it's actually a very good course because it gives you a little bit of the history of Linux and the different distributions and their relationships. And I've got to say, it doesn't take very long. It's a pretty sort of easy thing to run through, and I would actually recommend it. I did it quite recently, and I thought I knew some of this stuff, and it was actually just very interesting to sort of get a structured sort of approach to that. It's a very good course, and it's free. And I mean, there are some that you can pay for and get a free Chromebook, but the intro one's free, so that's a good. So good question, thank you. Any other questions for anybody else on the panel? Anyone would like to throw anything else out there? So if not, we'll just do a sort of once round sort of wrap up. Just any sort of final thoughts on really what you're seeing, what you hope to see, anything else you just want to throw in there.
Okay.
And actually, before you start, because I'll forget by the time it gets back to me, the Open Mainframe project is open to anybody who'd like to join it. If you're interested in joining the project, talk to me, or Scott Fagan's here from Seay. Scott's on the technical steering committee board. I'm on the board of the actual committee. So contact one of us if you're interested. We'll get you in touch with the right people. And this is really just starting now, so we're just setting the standards. So if you're interested, then please please reach out to one of us. So Alan, would you like to wrap up?
So my final comment: 5 years ago, when SUSE joined the OpenStack Foundation to deliver a cloud product. I'm not the product manager, and I'm not a customer, but I went into the product manager and I said, okay, we've got to have it on the mainframe. And he was like, well, we barely got it on x86. I'm going, I know, but we got to have it on the mainframe. And now it's there. So I was excited when he first said, okay, we got it on the roadmap, and now we're delivering it. I'm really excited because to me, it completes the data center. Now I can run my services. It gives me that opportunity to automate and orchestrate and put policy across my data center, across all the different architectures. And to me, that is a very powerful story. And now, couple that with open source, I'm excited about the future. I really am.
And SUSE is developing the KVM that's used on the Linux one.
Yeah. So one of the things we had to get there, right, was to get KVM on the box.
Right.
Now we've got OpenStack on the box, so we've got all the pieces are just coming together, and it's kind of like, happy birthday, kind of thing.
Thanks, Alan. So Bryan.
Yeah, and definitely appreciate SUSE supporting the KVM that we deliver. So I think 2 points. One is, if you are running Linux in your enterprise today, and you haven't looked at Linux on Z, or you haven't looked at Linux 1, take a look, right? It's at least worth a look at the capabilities that it delivers, at some of our largest and smallest customers that are running it. They're running it for a reason, and they're getting benefit out of it today. So please take a look. If you've looked at it in the past is so yesterday, right? It's changed so much even over the past 6 months. Take a look. I mean, the Java capabilities, the open source capabilities, the management capabilities, the speed, the performance, everything's just improved so much. Take another look. It's worth a look for your business. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. Cameron?
Yeah, as an academic, I would give anything to trade places with a young person today looking at a career in technology. I trade anything. I tell them that all the time. These are very exciting times for this space. And to see what IBM's doing in conjunction with the other major industry partners, bring in academics in it, I just like hanging out with these guys doing this stuff. It's fun to me. So I learn a lot from them. So these are exciting times. I'm honored to be a part of this process.
Excellent. Thank you, Cameron. So Ashley, the penultimate word, I guess. I'll say something.
I would say my message is, don't believe the hype. So don't believe the hype that mainframe is legacy and it doesn't enable growth and innovation. Yeah. Because I'm speaking from a customer perspective, it's a platform that can deliver enterprise-grade quality for your enterprise solutions. So, and for the hype of, don't believe just what anyone tells you, including me. It's go out and talk to folks. There are plenty of groups, like there's Linux Council groups that are held out. I know we have an active one in the New York metropolitan area where you can talk to other shops and understand what value the Linux on Z solution brought to them and how it could apply to you. It's good technology, and I think that, again, there's a lot of excitement, especially around the Open Mainframe project and the additional workloads, so why not be part of that?
So thanks, Ashley. So I mean, I think just to summarize all of this, I mean, really the things that have changed in the last few months really are, I believe, to be very significant. It really, you know, I hope it's not coincidental that we've addressed, that IBM has addressed the things that the community was saying needed to be addressed. Most of those barriers to adoption really have been taken away. The politics still remains, and I think, you know, some of that is just about us continuing this battle. We're doing a lot of things internally to try and come up with more and more compelling reasons for you to take back with you to show that, you know, that starting with Linux or continuing with Linux is really a viable move. So if you have questions that you'd like to do individually, we can stay. We have to get our mics off so that they can shut down the recording. But if you want to come up and ask questions right now, happy to do that. As a final note, thank you for attending the session, and a special thank you to everybody on the panel.
Thank you.
Really very interesting.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.